Good evening. Hello, welcome. My name is Carlia Shelton Benjamin, and I'm chairperson of the 152nd Street Black Ballet Legacy. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this exciting collaboration between the Black Ballet Legacy Council and Miss Alexis Wilson. But first, let me begin with a little bit about us. The 152nd Street Black Ballet Legacy Council are 5 Black ballerinas whose careers began at Dance Theater of Harlem and whose sisterhood remains strong. We are an independent 501c3 organization and not an extension of the Dance Theater of Harlem organization. Our mission is to collectively preserve, educate, and give voice to the essence of Black ballet. Our goal is to actively provide education, inspiration, and empowerment to aspiring dancers of color, which brings us to our presentation this evening.
Hi, I'm Lydia Abarca Mitchell, and I am the Vice Chairperson and Treasurer of the 152nd Street Black Ballet Legacy Council. We've assembled an array of a few of our most respected and celebrated artists from ballet to Broadway to help guide us through the multifaceted career that Mr. Wilson created and so successfully sustained. To help get this evening started is an old friend of his and a familiar and beloved face in our arts community. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Debbie Allen.
Hi, I'm Debbie Allen, and I am here to just, for a moment, sing the praises of Mr. Billy Wilson, inarguably one of the most gifted artists and educators of our time. His incredible legacy of work speaks for itself. I was there at the opening of Bubbling Brown Sugar when I saw that incredible staging. Miss Vivian Reed won every award. Billy was nominated for every award, and he really should have won. I got the privilege of working with him in a production at the New Federal Theater with Mr. Woody King. I was playing Louis Armstrong's wife, and I got the best reviews from the biggest critic, the toughest critic in New York, directed and guided by Billy. So I am thrilled that the world is paying attention and taking a moment to recognize his greatness, his contribution, and his legacy. And I am blessed that I too am one of his little diamonds in the rough that he helped shape.
We are proud to celebrate the icon that is Billy Wilson. Tonight, we will walk through his legacy with his daughter, Alexis Holly Wilson, and our esteemed guests. And now, I have the pleasure of presenting to you dancer, actress, accomplished author of Not So Black and White, and a dear friend, Miss Alexis Wilson.
Good evening. I am so grateful to the 152nd Street Black Ballet Legacy and so excited to be here to celebrate the life and work of my father, Billy Wilson, with all of you. The goal of this evening is to share a legacy about an artist who so successfully sustained a career as dancer, as educator, choreographer, and director for his 59 years. We will also learn a little bit about the private man. We want to keep Billy Wilson's contributions in the minds of those already familiar, and to also shed a light on the younger generation so they also know about the space this artist carved out, as Ms. Debbie Allen just shared, while the world is paying attention, particularly for us and to us as Black artists and artists of color. I'll begin at the beginning. He was born William Adolphus Wilson. He never liked Adolphus. He liked Billy, not Bill. Billy grew up in North Philadelphia. He was the youngest of four to hardworking and loving parents who were absolutely committed to education. His father, Ernest, worked for the US Mint as a melter and was a barber in the evenings. His mother, Beatrice Butler, worked as a domestic. They struggled, but wanted all of the kids to go to college. His older brother, also Ernest, worked at Howard University and occasionally for the State Department. His other brother, Calvin, was a judge in Philadelphia, and his sister, Thelma, whom he was very close to, was the first Black woman to graduate from Moore Institute of Art with a major in fashion illustration. Billy once said, "I can't remember ever not dancing. It's all I ever wanted to do." He started dancing at age 7. One of his greatest influences on his dancing was the movies. He would do his homework in school so he could go to a picture show or a movie right after class. The other influence on the theater and drama in his career came from the church. By the age of 11, he performed as a principal dancer in almost every public school in Philadelphia. At that time, he also received a scholarship to study tap at the Sidney King School of Dance. He was constantly involved with a steady stream of community projects through school, church, and theater groups, and the cotillions. But we have a very special guest who knows all about those early years more than I ever could, because she was there as a lifelong friend and treasured colleague throughout my father's life.
Miss Joan Myers Brown will speak about those early years firsthand, growing up with Billy to end at age 19 when he made his way to New York City and the commercial theater. Miss Brown is the founder of the fabulous and popular Philadanco and established the International Association of Blacks in Dance. She has been awarded numerous honorary doctorates and was awarded the 2012 National Medal of the Arts, presented to her at the White House by President Barack Obama. She is truly a living legend and one of the few people who can say, "I knew Billy when." Please welcome Miss Joan Myers Brown.
Good evening, good evening. I am probably one of the few people who knew Billy Wilson as a boy, and I had the good fortune and the distinct honor of watching him become a great man. I have been his friend, his sister, his teacher, his confidant, his dance partner, whatever else he needed. We were just attracted by affection and pride. I first met Billy when he was about 14 or 15. I'm not sure, because as always, he was, even as a boy, a deep thinker and an old soul. He walked into the Sydney School of Dance where I was studying and also was a student teacher. Billy had on a pair of tap shoes, strings tied together and hanging over his shoulder, and he flashed that magnetic smile. There were only a few young boys in the school, so immediately he was adored by all the girls. At first, Billy would only take tap. Slowly, he joined the older guys in the Dunham classes, and the way I got him to take ballet was I promised him I would let him dance with a dancer he liked named Jackie. The hardest thing I managed to do was to get him out of his gym shorts and into a pair of tights. Little by little, he started coming to the adult ballet classes because there were older boys. He became everybody's little brother, and when he started planning for the student recital, he danced with everybody. Eventually, he was choreographing small dances with the other girls. When it came prom time, Billy was everybody's date. One year, he must have gone on 10 proms. By the time he was 17 or 18, he had the bug for ballet. I was taking classes with Anthony Tudor at a white school, and the school wasn't too happy and would only let one Black student in. Mr. Billy Wilson was able to get in classes, and they fell in love with him too, just like everybody always did. Mr. Tudor did tell Billy that if he really wanted to dance, he should go to New York City. Billy at that time still loved tap and idolized Gene Kelly. So he immediately auditioned for Broadway, and the rest is history. During his time growing up, Billy was creating dances for the dancing school and for cotillions. He danced on local TV shows and every kind of event that was possible. His talent and ability grew as he grew older. Billy became very ambitious and definitely was driven. He had some successful and prominent siblings, and he knew that they didn't think highly of his love of dance. It didn't seem lucrative or honorable. One of his brothers was even a judge. Billy had the desire to be successful at whatever he was doing, and that is why he always took care of every detail, always being prepared, always trying to please people, and always doing his best. I was Billy's friend throughout his entire lifetime, even his relationships and both marriages. When he sent for Sonia and the baby to come to America, I was the first person he brought them to meet. I always remember Sonia had Holly in a basket, and that chapter of his life in Philadelphia began. I always remember his pride in being his first Broadway show, and we were also very proud of what he considered his success.
So it was at the age of 19 that Billy made his way to New York City to try his hand at making it as a dancer on Broadway. He was hired for the first show he auditioned for, Carmen Jones, based on George Bizet's opera Carmen. This was 1943. Later, in 1954, Dorothy Dandridge and Harry Belafonte starred in the film version. His next Broadway show would be Bells Are Ringing, starring Judy Holliday. Billy was the only Black dancer in the cast. It was a Comden and Green show with Jerome Robbins as director and co-choreographer to Bob Fosse. Following this was the show Jamaica, starring Lena Horne and Ricardo Montalban, with choreography by Jack Cole. Alvin Ailey was a featured dancer in that show. Then it was the London Company of West Side Story, starring Chita Rivera, directed and choreographed by Jerome Robbins. Once again, he was the only Black dancer in the cast. This was the show to bring him to Europe, which would be a most important chapter in his life and career. During a performance, directress of the National Ballet of Holland, now called the Dutch National Opera and Ballet, Madame Sonia Gaskell saw him in the show and invited him to join the company as a soloist. Although a Black dancer dancing in a classical ballet company at that time was highly improbable, it did happen and he accepted. Not only would the ballet change his life, but so would a baby ballerina by the name of Sonia van Beers, who would also become my mother. In this clip from German television, we see the two of them dancing in Symphony in C by George Balanchine. These two arresting dancing creatures, black and white in the 50s, would dance together to create ballet magic and become European ballet stars and fall in love. My father had always told us growing up that he'd never seen anyone dance le sylphide as beautifully as my mother. And years later, Arthur Mitchell would tell me around the age of 11 that my mother's beret was like that of a hummingbird's wings on the stage. My father's success had inspired Carl Schuck, then the company's ballet master, to create Jazz Nocturne for him. And internationally renowned choreographer Serge Liffard created the ballet Othello for him. My mother danced the role of Desdemona. They married, and in 1965 in The Hague, Den Haag, I was born. By this time in the mid-60s, the Black Revolution had taken to the streets, and my father felt pulled to be back home. Brandeis University had telegraphed to invite him to be head of their dance department at the newly constructed Spingold Theater. He accepted. We made the move back here to the States. However, he decided not to renew the Brandeis contract, and we returned back to Amsterdam. But then Harvard University reached out about directing their famed Hasty Pudding theatricals. And most importantly, the Elma Lewis Center for Afro-American Artists hired him to direct the dance company which brought us back here to stay in 1969. This would be his way to contribute to the Black artist cause during this tumultuous time of civil and racial unrest. We would later move to Boston. My father did some very important work during this time. That photo you see with the woman standing behind my father with the dramatic brows was Joan Crawford. For those who don't know Joan Crawford, she was one of the biggest movie stars of the 30s and 40s, who was donating a new studio to the Brandeis Dance Department. At Elma Lewis School, he was teaching and choreographing during this racially hot time in Roxbury and Boston, Mass. The center was often vandalized, and they also worried for my mother's safety as they navigated the historical ugliness that was America's relationship with Black folks, but also interracial marriage. In 1970, my brother Parker Flavio was born. At the same time, a strain on the marriage was growing. After Elma Lewis, my parents started their own dance school and company called the Dance Theater of Boston, comprised of 8 dancers. By this time, Billy was choreographing and directing more. His next project would be joining the creative team to do staging for a brand new children's television show for WGBH, together with the producer and dear friend, Christopher Sarson, called Zoom. So when we found ourselves jumping onto Zoom during the pandemic, what I immediately thought of was the original Zoom. It was a wonderful 70s show performed by and for kids. It won 2 Emmys. Billy loved working on that show. I often sat on a swivel stool off in the corner behind the cameras to watch and turn green with envy. However, although work for my father was good, the marriage was falling apart. Then Broadway knocked, and a new chapter would begin. The show to bring my father back to Broadway as a choreographer was The Odyssey, starring Yul Brynner and Joan Diener. The show opened and closed, but Billy's work got noticed and was the spark to ignite what would become a successful and fulfilling Broadway career. Meanwhile, my parents' separation turned into divorce, and when they sat down to discuss custody, my mother told my father to take us. And we left Boston to live with our father in Manhattan, which to us was like the Emerald City. The next show to inspire some of his best and most commercially successful work was Bubbling Brown Sugar. It played at the then Amphitheater and premiered March 2nd, 1976. The show was a timeline, starting in the present, then going back in time to span the 20s to the 40s, led by 2 stage stars of the older generation who take the younger generation on this time travel to celebrate their own history of the Harlem Renaissance.
Hi, I'm Vivian Reed, and when I think of Billy Wilson, of course I think of Sweet Georgia Brown.
Everybody! tell you just why. You know I don't lie. Not much.
Talented, fun to be around, giving. I miss you, Billy. The world needs a Billy Wilson.
I used to call myself the renegade ballerina because I would occasionally step away from the ballet stage to pursue my second love, jazz. I was so honored and privileged to perform in Bubbling Brown Sugar and work with stars like Cab Calloway, Avon Long, and the fabulous Vivian Reed. Great singing and dancing and beautiful costumes. I didn't work directly with Billy, but he came to critique the show one day in Paris. I was featured as the sophisticated lady, and he came backstage and told me he felt something. He felt what the solo was supposed to make him feel. What a compliment for me that was. When I think of Billy, his direction and choreography were always so clear, and what a gift that was to all of us. Thank you, Billy.
They say into your early life romance came, and in this heart of yours burns a flame that flickered one day and died. Oh,
My father first met Chip Garnett at the end of a long day of auditions rather, for Brown Sugar. Everyone was tired when in walked this 6'3" gorgeous man with a voice to make everyone swoon. That first meeting would lead Billy and Chip to an 18-year love story to outshine that of my parents until their deaths. However, my earlier relationship with Chip was mostly difficult. I didn't understand at 11 why our mother had disappeared from our lives and why this man seemed to have taken her place. Even in the 70s, and even in the more liberal melting pot of New York City, things like this weren't discussed with children. Chip was referred to as my father's friend or our uncle. As an adolescent, I struggled, but my father would tell me, it is what it is, and not everyone's going to like it. But Chip loves you and Parker like his own, and would do anything for you. I cannot apologize for my life with Chip. Thankfully, Chip and I would eventually find our way together, and I would realize that I owed him nothing but love in return. Bubbling Brown Sugar would be my father's first of 3 Tony nominations. On that first Tony night, my father brought me at 11 as his date. He lost to Michael Bennett of A Chorus Line, but as usual, he was a king to me. And on that night, I felt like Cinderella at the ball. I even remember what I wore from head to toe. Whether in his private life or with the work, Billy strove to always impart keeping an open mind about people, places, and projects. He always fought against the category, the expected, and the boundary. He was always about pushing all of that for himself and asked the same of others and for me, which is why diving into this next show, changing up the expected, was a natural fit for him. Billy Wilson's next big Broadway show would be the all-Black version of Guys and Dolls and bring him his second Tony nomination. He both choreographed and directed this show. It played at the Broadway Theater. It continues to be one of the holy grail shows of the Broadway stage. This production starred Robert Guillaume, Norma Donaldson, Ernestine Jackson, William Randolph, Christophe Pierre, and the incomparable Ken Page as Nicely Johnson. Our next very special guest is one of our Broadway giants, and pun intended, one of the nicest guys you ever want to meet.
So true, Alexis. Hello, my name is Gail McKinney Griffith, and I'm the secretary of the 152nd Street Black Ballet Legacy Council. I'm pleased to introduce an artist of undeniable talent. His name is Ken Page. Ken's Broadway debut was in Billy Wilson's all-Black revival of Guys and Dolls. As Nicely Nicely Johnson, Ken's show-stopping rendition of Sit Down, You're Rocking the Boat brought him unanimous praise. And in 1977, a Theatre World Award. He appeared as the Cowardly Lion in Broadway's The Wiz, and he starred in Ain't Misbehaving, Cats, and Louie, just to name a few. And here to tell us of his experiences with Billy is actor, singer, director, Mr. Ken Page.
When I first met Billy was when we did the 1976 all-Black production of Guys and Dolls. And I had auditioned for the show 7 times. So he wasn't sure. But at any rate, I ended up in it. That's another long story. But I ended up in it. And it was one of those, every so often in a career, you have moments that change your life. Now, of course, this was a Broadway debut. So it certainly changed my life immediately. But working with Billy, watching him work and watching the style that he worked with and the language and the manner. I mean, I still use, even now when I'm directing, I use phrases that Billy had when we worked together, which we all loved. When somebody would do a step and they were off, he'd say, that step is months too late. It's months too late, much too casual, months too late, But I think what I got out of it, more so than all the work and all of the wonderful things that went into the production, was gaining the friend and the mentor. I mean, Billy to me was like a mentor because I was very young. I was 21 and I'd never met anyone at his level who was African-American with that kind of control and power in a work situation and so forth. And it was mesmerizing and absolutely instructional. I've seen pictures of myself back then and I realized I was actually imitating his style. I was wearing Tams, and even today I still wear the glasses and so forth. But he really influenced me a lot. And once we'd done the show and so forth, we became friends. And his advice to me as time went on and things that we talked about and life things, not just career things. I remember going to his home in Chip, and the beauty of it, the taste and the thing. I went back to my apartment and I was like, I got to make my apartment look like Billy's apartment, And when I think about that time and how he influenced me, I've thought a lot about it in the recent weeks because Holly/Alexis and I have been talking about doing this. And it really made me think about how much he did influence me. The fact that he was one of very few Black directors at the time, and I'd say few directors. There were a few Black choreographers. There was George Faison and this one, that one, the next one. But as far as Broadway, there weren't a lot. And he was one of the people who changed the landscape. Doing Guys and Dolls at that time was very controversial for all kinds of different reasons and so on and so forth. But his vision, which I believe he had before, long before the actual Broadway production happened, he wanted to do it and he got to do it. And it brought a lot of people to prominence, myself included. And it gave, I always like to tell people that people say, well, it wasn't very much of a success, was I said, no, it was. Because there was the Broadway company, there was the Vegas company, there was the national tour. So anytime you get that many iteration of a show, it's a success, no matter what else goes on. It was a rough time for him because of a lot of logistical, political things that went on, but it lives on in the minds of all of us who were part of it. Debbie Allen and Maurice Hines, myself, Ernest C. Jackson, Robert Guillaume, I think Judy Pace, Emily Yancey were in the Vegas company. I mean, there were all these people that had work because of Billy Wilson's vision. So I would want to say more in conclusion, I suppose, that he was just someone who came to the scene, Broadway, and of course we know he had done West Side Story in London and all the ballet and dance world work that he had done previous to that, not only and then afterwards teaching. But the Broadway community benefited greatly. And I think this is so wonderful because a lot of people, newer people, younger people, don't really know of his work because it was in that time period. And I think it's important to know that he's one of the architects of what we know as the African-American contribution to the musical theater. Very much so, between Guys and Dolls and Bubbling Brown Sugar and a show we did off-Broadway, Lewis and so forth. He really is an important figure. So when I think of Billy, I really think the first word that always comes to my mind is elegance. I want to say talent, but the first thing that really comes to my mind is elegance. He was one of the most elegant men I've ever met. The way he dressed, his manner, his way of speaking, his connection to his art, everything about him had an elegance to it. And I learned much from him in that way. Needless to say, the talent was tremendous and manifest. I think of him as elegant. I think of him as articulate. I think of him as demonstrative in his art form and language, therefore. I think of him as being one of the true architects of what we know as our legacy in the Black theater, the Black musical theater in particular. And I am so glad to get to say this, and I hope everybody watching this tonight is feeling the same thing. He was very important in the mix of what made us who we are now. And I honor him, I love him, I miss him, and I will always represent what I learned from Billy Wilson.
Billy Wilson was a choreographer who worked fast, could help shows that were in trouble, and knew how to get an audience on their feet. Billy choreographed 8 shows for Broadway: The Odyssey, followed by Bubbling Brown Sugar, Guys and Dolls, and Eubie, which garnered him his 3rd Tony nomination, sharing it with Henry Letang, starring Gregory and Maurice Hines. Irma la Douce, which he choreographed and directed for London's West End. The Little Prince and the Aviators, starring Michael York. Stop the World, I Want to Get Off, starring Sammy Davis Jr. and Marion Mercer. Merlin, starring Chita Rivera and Doug Henning. And the Alan J. Lerner and Charles Strauss show, Dance a Little Closer, starring Lynn Cariou, Liz Robertson, and George Rose. As we move into the 80s, while Billy was becoming more successful, his friends and fellow artists were dying at a dizzying rate from the plague of AIDS. Our dance and theater community, in particular, were getting ravaged and demonized by this insidious disease. But Billy kept working, as he would say, like a fiend. Among television specials and club acts, he also found a home as an artist in resident at Carnegie Mellon University, brought over by the director of Stop the World, I Want to Get Over, Mel Shapiro, then drama head of CMU. Billy would remain part of that faculty for over 5 years, teaching dance classes and creating productions for their paying public on the Kresge Main Stage Theater, like the playbills you see now. I ended up at CMU myself, and it was a very special time to be there. Out of that period produced some of the most important Black talent to later grace the Broadway stage, television, film, and music scene. Billy Wilson cared for, guided, and advocated for a laundry list of uber-talented Black students and students of color, or BIPOC students, at a time when the playing field had no idea what to do. Here is one of those shining examples, and someone I'm sure you will recognize, Mr. Billy Porter.
When I think of Billy Wilson, I think of the first time we met, and I sang for him in musical theater class, and he said, "You're going to have to be in charge of holding yourself to a higher standard because you have the kind of talent where the world will not know how. You're going to have to hold a standard of excellence for yourself." And he was right. And the reason why I'm standing here, sitting here, speaking to you with the success that I have is because of those words that he spoke to me so early in my development.
Good evening. I'm Marcia Sells, one of the members of the 152nd Street Black Ballet Legacy, and so excited to be here to introduce another Carnegie Mellon alumna who is a major star and has been for a very long time, Tamara Tunie. Tamara Tunie, as many know, has been the forensic specialist and a medical examiner on the long-running Law and Order SVU. But she's also been a major director and stage artist, and will be appearing soon in the Netflix series Cowboy Bebop, and also part of the cast of the Denzel Washington directed film Journals of Jordan. Without further ado, Tamara Tunie.
Good evening, everybody. I'm hoping you can see me. I am coming to you from Toronto, and so happy to be a part of this tribute to Billy tonight. I was blessed to meet Billy Wilson in my senior year at Carnegie Mellon University. I had spent 3 years at the university with a lack of Black professors and leadership in the school. And when Mel Shapiro arrived, as Holly mentioned earlier, not only did he work with Billy on Stop the World, but he was an incredible friend of Billy's. And so Mel announced, I want to say in February of my senior year, that Billy Wilson was going to come to town to have auditions at the school for a fall project. Of course, I was graduating at that time, so I wasn't going to be able to participate in the fall project. But Kent Gash and I, who was a junior at the time, marched into Mel Shapiro's office and said to Mel, Kent, we feel that we need to go and meet Billy Wilson at the airport and pick him up as the leading Black students in the fine arts department. So Kent and I jumped in the car and drove out to the airport. Neither of us had ever seen a picture of Billy Wilson. We just knew the legend. And this was a time when you could meet people at the gate. So Kent and I parked the car, went to the airport, arrived at the gate and waited for Mr. Billy Wilson to arrive. The flight arrived and people were, getting off the plane, and we're waiting and we're looking. And this is about 8 o'clock at night in February, so it's nighttime. And we're waiting and we're waiting. And suddenly we see this tall, beautiful Black man in sunglasses and a full-length fur coat down to his ankles, walk like a king off the plane. And Kent and I turned to each other and said, that's Billy Wilson. So we greeted him and took him back to the school. And as we were dropping him off at his hotel, he said, well, I'll see you both tomorrow. And I said, well, you won't see me because I'm graduating this year, so I won't be auditioning. And he said, well, I would like for you to be my assistant at the auditions. Now, a lot of people don't know, I've been dancing since I was 5 years old. And my major at Carnegie Mellon was musical theater. So I was taking dance classes, music classes, and of course, acting classes. So I was very proud and happy to be asked to be Billy's assistant at the auditions. So the auditions commenced the next day, and I indeed helped Billy, with teaching the choreography, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It was a very successful audition. Billy got back on the plane the next day or so and flew back to New York. But before he left, he said to me, when you get to New York, give me a call. Here's my number. Of course, I was floored. So, cut to September of that year, I arrived in New York City, and the first call I made was to Billy Wilson. And not only did he accept my call graciously, but he commenced to be my mentor, be my friend, be my employer. I was lucky enough to do one of the tours of Bubbling Brown Sugar in Europe. We did a show that was called Those Hollywood Musicals up in Tarrytown. Billy hired me to be a dancer and singer in the show. And also he asked me again to assist him. And we would be in rehearsals and Billy would say, and Billy would do some fabulous choreography. And, you know, and then he turned to me and said, Tunie, what did I just do? And I was like, you did this, bump, 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 bump. And he was like, right. Okay, y'all do that. You know, and I remember there was a club in New York called Sweetwater's, and we did a cabaret show there that Danny Holgate and Billy put together. And of course, Danny was the musical director for Bubbling Brown Sugar, and I had worked with Danny, and I worked with Billy. And when I worked with Danny, Danny said, do you know Tamara Tunie? And Billy's like, of course I know her, hire her, send her to Europe. Anyway, Billy was, as Ken Page said, elegance was always the first thing, but he was always just such a loving person and a supportive person and someone that you could always count on and someone who was always there and someone who would just, you know, give you the bold, cold facts. I loved Billy Wilson, and I was honored and privileged to have been a part of his life and for him to be a part of mine. And of course, at a certain point, I was brought into the family and met Holly and Parker and Chip, and they just all embraced me. So I'm so happy to be a part of this evening. Thank you all for asking me to be a part of this. And when I think of Billy,
one of the many successful productions that Billy created while at CMU was a show called Broadway Cabaret, which was a compilation of vignettes from a variety of Broadway shows, from West Side Story to Lost in the Stars, which was based on the novel Cry the Beloved Country. Here's a quick moment from that show, Broadway Cabaret. That was actually me dancing with Kina Dorsey. In those Billy Wilson productions, he inserted artists like Michael McElroy, Billy Porter, Ty Taylor, Benita Harbor, Ming Na, and others to a performing position of power and importance they might not otherwise have had the chance to explore. In his production of Jesus Christ Superstar, he cast Ty Taylor in the role of Jesus Christ. Here's a little something that a couple more of his former CMU students, now professionals, wanted to share about Billy's impact on their person and career.
Hello, my name is Ty Taylor. Billy Wilson always referred to me as his absolute favorite student from Carnegie Mellon University. That's just a joke. I'm trying to stop myself from becoming overly emotional. I want to say that when I first met the man known as Billy Wilson, he exuded effervescence. And at the time, I didn't know what that meant. But through his example, over the years, I've tried to carry that into this world, the world that he left behind for all of us students and all of his loved ones to carry on the effervescence that he gave to us. He had a regality to him that I'd never seen before in person, in an African American, and a man and a human being. And so I live my life trying to carry that on through this world in his honor.
When I think of Billy Wilson, the words that come to mind are artistry, excellence, fashionista, teacher, mentor. Billy Wilson was one of the only Black male teachers I ever had in my training. I think he was the only one. And for a young Black kid from Ohio, looking for examples to really know that it was possible to do the thing that I love to do, he stood as that shining example. He did everything. He was a director, he was a dancer, he was a choreographer, he choreographed ballets, he choreographed for modern companies, he choreographed on Broadway, he directed on Broadway, he directed TV, he directed film, he did everything. And by example and requiring a level of excellence every time you walked into the room, you did not want to go in that room into one of his classes or one of his rehearsals unprepared. And he taught me what it meant to work hard. He helped me to understand that I had to be 10 times better and that there were no second chances. You had one shot and you went in the room and you gave it everything you had. My mother was a teacher, and of all the teachers that I've had, the two that really are the ones that I have modeled my own teaching after were my mom and Billy Wilson. Billy and my mom had many things in common, one being that you didn't want to come in unprepared, but there was a tough love. They taught me resilience. They taught me the value of hard work. They taught me to honor myself and to honor the thing that I was passionate about. I think that Billy's work should be done and out there in the world all the time as a shining example of amazing artistry and what is possible when you work at a certain level, at the ultimate level at all times. I will always appreciate what he's done for me and the influence that he had on my life. Billy Wilson is excellence.
So Billy continued on with his Broadway shows, staging smaller projects, and the work that helped to keep him young, working with college age and dance and drama students. But when all was said and done, it was going into the dance studio to create ballets that he would tell me repeatedly gave him that warm and fuzzy, familiar feeling. The place and the discipline where it all began for him. After the ballets he created for his own company years ago in Boston, but before they were mounted on the likes of Dance Theater of Harlem and the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater, Billy Wilson turned to his childhood friend and the superior dancers that she had been turning out year after year. Once again, Ms. Joan Myers Brown.
Thank you, Holly. This is just so wonderful. Thank you for doing it. Thank you for inviting me to be part of it. And here in my old age, I can just smile and be happy. But as I said before, Billy and I were lifelong friends. I was not only his big sister, I was his go-to when things were amiss. But the success of Philadelphia was very special to Billy, and he saw it as another place to express themselves. I asked him to create a ballet for Philadelphia that would just be Philadelphia, something that he always wanted to do. And he did this piece for us and several others for us. But he created first Samba, and then he did I Told Jesus for Deborah Chase Hicks, who we recently lost, but who had become a soloist with the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater. Then he did, and that eventually became Rosa, a tribute to Rosa Parks. we still do that every February in all the schools around the world. And then he created for Deborah Chase and Karen Pendergrass a ballet called Val Dos About. That was hilarious. It was Broadway type, but stole the stage for my dancers. And then the last ballet he created for Deborah Manning, who also was in the Ailey Company with Kevin Brown, called Ritual. So we had those 4 ballets in our repertoire, and I always bring them back because, you know, when I think of Billy, all I can think of is love. Billy loved to dance. Billy loved life. Billy loved love. And he said to me, and I always like to remember, I just love beautiful people. So when I think of Billy, I think of love.
When I think of Billy Wilson, immediately his image comes to mind. His dark-rimmed glasses, his tight-fitted shirt, his jazz pants with no dance belt, his jazz shoes. And then I see him become. He would become the character, the role, the spirit of the piece, whatever he wanted to convey to us. There was so much passion and love for what he was doing and so much history inside of him. It was easy for me to watch and listen to him and understand what I needed to do. Billy.
Alexis, I can't remember if I first met you at the theater or in the studio. My most vivid memories of you and Parker were backstage at City Center. You were very young and a very sharp and composed teenager. I'm a former principal dancer with Dance Theater of Harlem, but I was a soloist when Billy came to set his ballet Mirage. He was beautiful and had a very commanding presence. Mirage is subtitled The Games People Play and is about a cocktail party that upon the entrance of a late arriving guest goes sideways. It's one of the few ballets I've seen that deals with characters that are more like real people in a real situation. They're exaggerated, of course, because it's a ballet. The audience loved it because of this. It's not abstract, nor is it a fairy tale. And it has that touch of scandal. See what I mean? That little touch of scandal. The person you saw in the video was the lovely Yvonne Hall, and she was the first to do the role in the ballet. She was first cast. Billy himself casted the second cast and chose me as the late arrival. When I think of Billy, I remember the day he was casting and that the entrance of the character was the audition. When she enters alone, as you saw, the whole party stops and there's a very brief period of, well, who is this woman? And arriving ever so late. There were a couple of ladies who performed the entrance before me, but they didn't meet his satisfaction. He looked around the room and pointed at me and said, "Let me see you." I did the entrance and he said, "There she is." It was an amazing moment. I enjoyed dancing the ballet and working with Billy Wilson. He was very clear about what he wanted and how to have fun without going too far, which, given the subject and the characters, would have been easy to do. I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to dance the role, the ballet, and to have worked with this elegant, eloquent man. Thank you, Billy.
My father had originally created the ballet Mirage during his time at the Elma Lewis School, but then resurrected and updated it for the Dance Theater of Harlem in the early 80s. After originally creating Concerto in F for the Ailey Company, he later set it on the Dance Theater of Harlem to perform as well. In the beginning of the 90s, he made Ginastera by composer Alberto Ginastera for the company, a ballet inspired by the Spanish bullfights, which so excited him, and one of their principal dancers, Hugues Magin. The last piece he did for D.H. was a collaboration with Arthur Mitchell called Phoenix Rising. Aside from the longtime friendship that my father had with Mr. Mitchell, it was Carl Shook, co-founder of D.H. and my godfather, who was a most important influence and mentor to both artists. As a child, shown here in that small photo with me, I couldn't say Carl, so my brother and I always called him Chi-Chi. My father adored Carl, and he also adored Europe, and any chance for Billy to go to the Netherlands in particular was always a joy. In Amsterdam, in the late 80s into the early 90s, he created two hit shows called A Night at the Cotton Club and Josephine, the musical, The Life of Josephine Baker, which he directed and choreographed. Here to share a few words is the star of that show, who so beautifully portrayed Josephine Baker in that European production, Ms. Cheryl Howard.
When I think of Billy, I think of elegance, class, style, and integrity.
For the last 3 decades of his life, Billy moved tirelessly from ballets to academia and to Broadway, taking with him the full sum total of who he was, from the cross-continental experiences he so enjoyed to the rich core of growing up in the Pentecostal church with his siblings in North Philadelphia. He would say in an interview, "There is no possibility I can create something without bringing all of who I am to the work." He tried to also bring this to the work he created for another dear friend, Alvin Ailey. We are so lucky to have these two outstanding artists whom my father so adored with us this evening.
Good evening. I'm Sheila Rohan, and I have the honor of presenting these two wonderful artists, Sarita Allen and Masazumi Chaya. Sarita Allen appeared as an accomplished dancer with the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater, the Jameson Project, Complexions Contemporary Ballet, and Paradigm Dance Company. She holds the position of Artistic Advisor for Complexions and is an Alvin Ailey Ambassador, as well as a Master Pilates teacher. Masazumi Chaya began dancing with the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater in 1972. He served as an invaluable connection to the past and exceptional resource until he stepped down in 2020. I need to say that he was the Associate Artistic Director from 1991, appointed by Ms. Judith Jameson. Welcome to you both. So happy to have you with us.
Hello, little technical difficulty there. I hope you all are enjoying this as much as I am. I'm sure you are. I just really want to thank Alexis and the 152nd Street Legacy for having us here, having me here. I came to New York actually with Dance Theater of Harlem. That was my dream. So to see these ladies, it's just very moving. I'm going to start backwards with my journey with Billy. I think maybe about 5 years ago, Ailey did a revival, a restaging of The Winter in Lisbon, with the music by Dizzy Gillespie. And I had a true, if I could turn back time moment, because I began, the original version, I began the opening walk. And when the curtain opens and I saw the women walking, I had a flashback and I literally saw myself and Billy because I was behind him. And he said, just follow me, just walk with me. And as the dance progressed, it gets more lively and jazzy by the last section, Manteca, which is just come to Jesus moment. It's in show business, we call it, we get your life. And all the dancers and performers know what I mean. There's certain choreography where you literally get your life. It's just like, oh, it's just enthralling. So I had that moment. I was going crazy. My seatmate, my friend who went to the performance, was literally having to hold me down because I couldn't contain myself. I was sitting in the seat and I was like, I want to do that. So I really had a, if I could turn back time moment, I really wanted to do that. I just felt that. I was like, oh my God. So in the dance world, we have something called muscle memory, and every step in that dance is still in my memory. But what also is in my memory is the environment that Billy created in the rehearsal process, right? Which is different for each choreographer. He created a safe space, one where you have no fear to fail. You could try everything. He set that environment where you could just explore, and you were never afraid of anybody throwing anything at you or nothing like that. It was truly a safe space. So for an artist, that's everything, right? You just feel free to explore your boundaries, and if it's too far, he told you to come back, and if it's not enough, he would coax you to go further. He also led by example, because when you would see him do it, that was clear. He didn't really have to say that many words because he was so expressive and so articulate with his body. Between him and the Dizzy Gillespie music, it was very clear. that's also very comforting as an artist when the choreographer is very clear, the intention is clear. You know what they want. It's not ambiguous. You're not searching. So I remember that one of the most amazing rehearsal processes of my career, and I've worked with thousands of choreographers. Anyway, I also remember him working with all of my other castmates, and he casted it to perfection. Like he got little nuances that he couldn't have possibly known unless he knew these people intimately. It was almost weird. It was like, how did he know that about? He would give someone a certain something flourish, which really went perfectly with their personality and their quirks. So I always think of it like a couture, like if you have a dress designed on you in Paris, couture, every measurement, it's made for you to perfection, right? So that's how I feel about the ballet that he created for our whole cast at Ailey. For me, the steps felt like velvet on my body. They felt like on my joints. You know, it was nothing that was bad. It was like beautiful. It was organic because he also got my personality and he got the love of jazz and also the classical lines. It was amazing. It was a type of environment where you could not wait to go to rehearsal the next day, right? We couldn't wait. In fact, everybody came early. And we would, even if you weren't called, if it was a closed rehearsal, we would either look in the wings or we would look in the window. We just wanted to watch his process. You know, it was so enthralling. And he was so, just such a beautiful man. And it really was a masterclass, right? It was a masterclass. I remember my first day rehearsing with him. I got up early, I did Pilates, I did a ballet class. I said, okay, Billy Wilson's coming. I got to be warm. So I was warm. And he said, the music started. He said, okay, just stand behind me and just follow. And the first step, we were just walking really slowly. And all dancers know the hardest thing to do is walk on the stage, right? But the funny part is I was warm. I thought I was going to be thrashing and doing all this. He said, just walk. And then the most subtle things that he had me do with the arms, which was really difficult because it was very sensuous music and it's very easy to get locked up into kind of cliche, sexy things. And he would guide me. He says, no, it's not that. It's this. So I have that strong memory of him guiding me with just to perfection, and all of us. Yeah. Anyway, when I think of Billy, I'm going to repeat what everyone else has said. I think of elegance. I think of luxury. I think of eloquence and excellence. And lastly, I think of a gentle man.
Hello, hello. Hello, everybody.
Hello back. We can see you and hear you.
You can? I cannot hear. I cannot see me.
We can. We can see you.
Okay. So, Mr. Eri always asks me who would like to have a ballet from, and then, you know, of course, I heard of Billy Wilson's name. And so that's one of, and then one day he walked in. This was, we are rehearsing at the 1515 Broadway. He walked in with Mr. Wilson, and then Billy asked us to sit down, and then we sit down on the floor, and then he started playing a music, which is Gershwin's, George Gershwin's music, Concerto in F, which he's choreographing for 80 company. And then he explained, this is a solo, and their partner comes in, start dancing duet. Then second act is the two guys in the rooftop, kind of chilling out and then talking each other. And the last section, all dancers coming back and then dance. That was about. And I never had the experience like that. And the choreographer explained what he wanted to do with us. And then he kept it a few dancers for the first day. And next day he posted up for who he liked to work with. My name is not there. So I'm a little bit disappointed, but he told me I can sit down in the corner of that rehearsal studio and watch rehearsal. I said, oh, wonderful. And then I watched rehearsal. This was Concerto in F, 1981, he choreographed for us. And in 1984, company performed in the Metropolitan Opera House with the full orchestra with the principal pianist. It was a spectacular performance and it's beautiful. And the second ballet he gave to us was the Lullaby for Jazz Baby. It was in 1983. And three couples, and then, but my character is more acting part, not so much step. And I had a duet with Donald Sanders, and I had a great time working with him because sometimes he asked me to, what do you think just putting the shoulder on the back of her shoulder? And then do this way, that way. Then I go home and watch all the Betty Davis movie or all the movie and then watch what they do, those actors. And then next day I show to be, what do you think? Put in the shoulder and can I look back or look back and put on and all different stuff. And he loved it with this process. And then I had a wonderful time for that. And the premiere, we take rehearsal in Miami Beach and Jackie Gleason Theater. And then we had a great time. And third ballet was Miss Jameson told me, we're gonna get in the Mr. Wilson's ballet for the 80 company. I said, oh yeah. I was so excited because I haven't seen him in a long time. And then it's gonna be, he came and he explained to what we like to use the music. Music gonna be Dizzy Gillespie's music. I said, oh, wow. Then he said, and also Miss Jameson said, this is gonna be celebrating his 75th birthday anniversary. And because his birthday was October 21st, and we're going to be opening in December season. And I think it's going to be wonderful to be celebrated this 75 years old celebration. So that was started out. And then Billy said to me, when you're going to teaching or rehearsing, remember the openings, already Sarita mentioned to me that how they walk and stuff, but he asked me to think about this is people waiting, and then something will happen waiting. So individual have something quiet, waiting feeling of that. And the second section is a young guy gonna go out, dressed up, check out the clothing, and meet his friends, two friends, and go to places, and two beautiful girls coming in, and they had danced together. And the last section was a big celebration of big dance, which is a show of everybody. And the original cast led by Desmond Richardson in the middle. And it was a wonderful cast. And that between 1992 to 2018, we did a Winter in Lisbon, total of over 341 performances, which is included lots of new US cities, plus international tour, which is Japan, Hong Kong, China, Singapore, Paris, London, Athens, Copenhagen, Tel Aviv, Zurich, Vienna, and many more cities. And what happened is during a European tour, and especially German audience, they don't go up. They just keep clapping. What are we going to do? We're going to do already 6 bows we did, couple bows, individual bows, everything. Still audience screams. So I have to figure out, okay, we have to do encore. So we put the encore back on, and the audience stamping the floor and the scream. And then once end of that, Mr. Gillespie's photo come down, people scream. And then that was a wonderful, wonderful experience with working with Mr. Wilson. And then plus, everybody already mentioned he's elegant and he's so fashionable. He come to the rehearsal with the white shirts with that color and the cashmere sweater, wrap around from shoulder to front and tie, and sometimes red, sometimes striped shirts with a blue cashmere sweater, and then sometimes yellow cashmere sweater. I mean, he's beautifully dressed. And so I started thinking, okay, I should save my money and buy a cashmere sweater too. Anyway, but what I was thinking, when I think of Billy is his sunshine, bright up room when he walk in with his smile and give a positive energy. And then that day, the rehearsal or performance goes so well. And just I was so lucky to have a wonderful time with him. Thank you.
This is all so delicious. And I have to say to Chaya that my father would come home from rehearsal and talk about how ridiculously chic you were. Listening to everyone brings back so many feelings and memories, but listening to Sarita and Chaya lands on an especially vivid period for my father and for me. And since this was the last ballet before his death in 1994, which wasn't too long after the premiere of this ballet, I wanted to share what he was privately going through the night before the first rehearsal for Lisbon. Earlier that day, the two of us had brought Chip to St. Vincent's Hospital, to their psychiatric wing. Chip had had a nervous breakdown some months before. St. Vincent's was the go-to hospital for Greenwich Village and for AIDS patients in particular at that time in the 80s and 90s. Once admitted, we went home around early evening. My father was preparing, trying to let Dizzy Gillespie's music inspire him, which he was struggling with only because of life's other issues pressing on him, because he loved Dizzy Gillespie. Around midnight, we were awoken by a call that Chip had left the hospital in a robe and foam slippers. He'd ordered a town car to take him to where we used to live in Englewood, New Jersey. The police had him. We went to pick him up. He was completely wide-eyed, confused, and in a manic state. We got him back into the car to drive back to St. Vincent's to have him readmitted again. With the help of a group of police officers on 7th Avenue, they managed to coax him back through the doors of emergency. We finally got him tucked away around 4 a.m. We then walked out to get into the car, but the car had been towed. After getting cash, we cabbed over to the Hudson River docks to get the car released. By the time we got home around 5 a.m., from what had been one of the most harrowing and interminable nights, one of many, I went to my day job, and my father went to the Ailey studio to begin his first day of rehearsals for the winter in Lisbon. In 1994, Chip and then Billy, 6 months later, died of AIDS. My father used to say to try to never presume to know a person before knowing their personal story, because life happens to everyone. However, as they say, the proof is in the pudding. The pudding of that last ballet and what Billy Wilson was able to produce, despite life taking him through it and being barely able to put one foot in front of the other, is a testament to the wellspring of his talent and artistry, as well as the strength and commitment he had to the work. He would say, "Your work will save you." I'd seen firsthand how that had been true for him over and over again. And between racism and sometimes those out to take credit for or steal the work he had done, he was never to be underestimated and was always a class act. I just want to say in closing that I think we do have this unique opportunity, again, while the world is paying attention, to celebrate us, to bring as much artistry and creativity to the world at large as possible. As Stevie Wonder said, love's in need of love today. And we do that through our art. This has been a glimpse into Billy Wilson's 59 years of life and work. He choreographed over 30 ballets and over 40 other commercial projects. The breadth of his contributions are not merely important to remember, but to cherish and celebrate more than ever. When I think of Billy Wilson, my father, I think about the creative expanse of the work that he was able to create during his short time here. I think of him gently coaxing my leg to go higher at the ballet bar. And I think of love.
When I think of Billy, I think of years of friendship, years of my looking at a beautiful dancer, and a heart and kindness that is beyond. So I love Billy, and I always shall.
Thank you, Ms. Rivera, and thank you so much, Alexis Wilson, for both preserving and developing and also reaching out to us at the 152nd Street Black Ballet Legacy to be a part of this wonderful moment, to share this story, this amazing story about the history of somebody who made history. We're just so blessed for our group and 152nd Street Black Ballet Legacy, and all of us who've had the and each who've told their stories and had the opportunity to have been a part of Billy Wilson's story. I want, on behalf of the 152nd Street Black Ballet Legacy, to thank Joan Myers-Brown, Ken Page, Tamara Tunie, Sarita Allen, Masazumi Chaya, Debbie Allen, Vivian Reed, Billy Porter, Ty Taylor, Michael McElroy, Christina Johnson, Chita Rivera, Cheryl Howard, Rosemary Bettendick, Melanie White Dixon, New York Public Library for the Performing Arts, Brian Piazza, Kenneth Hansen, Lee Summers, and Diane McIntyre. On behalf of the 152nd Street Black Ballet Legacy, I am so grateful to say thank you to all of you who also joined us in hearing about this amazing, amazing man, Billy Wilson. Thank you, Alexis, again for sharing him with us. And I say good night to everyone. We're so glad that you joined us.